The warm mug of tea warded off the morning cold as Becerril stood atop the stone wall. The small town of Kainek sat quietly at her back, and the vast land of Praetoria stretched out before her as far as she could see. She wore no armor and had no weapon at her side. It felt good just to be herself, and not ready for battle. Becerril took a sip of her tea and sighed. It was the first time in a few weeks she'd been able to actually relax. Ever since they had defeated Obsidian, there had been constant work to do. The town needed repair, people needed healing, and the dead needed to be buried. Finally, all had settled down, and Becerril could focus on the healing she needed for herself, as well as of her companions. They've held up well under such stress. Her thoughts drifted to the young Fia Hawa and Delia of the Zenith Scale. They were instrumental in our victory, though it is a sad time in history for adolescents to go to war, because no place is safe. Becerril worried about Fia and Delia. She also worried about her elven friend, River Helendale, and how much demand had been put on him to heal the wounded. She mostly worried, though, about the future of the Splinterlands. A shape on the dawn horizon drew her from her thoughts. At first, she thought it was a red bird, but as it drew closer, she saw it was a bird far larger than any she'd ever seen, and it bore a rider on its back. The bird circled around the town and landed before the entry gates, a fierce expression on its face, and a tail that rippled out like ribbons. The guards of Kainek immediately moved to confront this unexpected visitor. Becerril slowly moved along the walls herself, knowing she had no weapon but still confident in her ability to fight with fists and feet. The rider slid to the ground. He was a strange-looking man, seemingly made of fire with grand red robes. He began speaking quickly to the guards. His voice carried on the gentle breeze, allowing Becerril to make out a few words as she approached. Urgent, I speak with Becerril. Please. I'm sorry, sir, one of the guards stated, but we are only letting in invited people within the town walls now. We've just recovered from an attack. I understand, the flaming man replied. But this truly cannot wait. Is Becerril still here? I am here, Becerril said, looking down at him from above the town gate. Who are you? The tense line in his shoulders softened in relief. My name is Joken of the Afrit, and I have come a long way to find you. An anxious energy filled Burgomaster William's office as Joken told his tale. Becerril and River both paced as they listened, moving in and out of the sunlight that came in through the tall windows. Fia sat on one of the chairs, and Delia sat on the arm of another, listening intently. The Burgomaster himself sat at his desk, hands clasped before him, and his brow furrowed. Joken spoke to them of the long journey he'd been on in an effort to save the Splinterlands from the Chaos Legion. He spoke of the Chaos Invasion and how nearly all of the world had fallen, and only a few strongholds still remained. He spoke of the Wizards' Council betrayal, led by Portia. He finished by telling them of his meeting with the wizards, Agrodius and Eubanius, and how they currently battled an eldritch god. They were busy holding closed a portal that this god was attempting to breach. Once Joken was done, Burgomaster William sat heavily back with a sigh. The situation's worse than I feared then, he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. I knew Praetoria was under full Chaos Legion control, but I had hoped it was better in the rest of the Splinterlands. What can we do against such darkness? River questioned, his arms wrapped tightly around himself. Hope is not yet lost, Joken assured. I have learned of a group called the Rift Watchers that make it their mission to battle the Chaos Legion with a goal of one day stopping them completely. The Rift Watchers seek to enter through the portal, to come here and help in our fight. That is why I have come for your aid. His burning gaze moved to Bera. The way for the Rift Watchers to enter must be open on our end. I have been given the means to do so by Agrodius himself. Why have you come to us? Bera inquired. Agrodius told me to find the dwarf leader that travels with a river elf and a girl born on the ocean under the sign of a crossed skull. He gestured across the mall, the long sleeve of his robe draping down. I have followed rumors and tales until I heard of the battle that happened here. But we are not special, Fia protested. Surely there is someone else to go to for help. Joken shook his head firmly. I trust the wisdom of a wizard as powerful as Agrodius. It is you all who are needed to open the way for the Rift Watchers. Can we do this here and now? Delia asked. Unfortunately, it is not that simple. In my possession is a scroll, with rites that must be invoked, and words that must be said within an ancient elemental temple that has been lost to the ages. We must journey there and complete this ritual. Delia leaned back, a frown twisting on her face. I have to agree with the Fia on this one. The scroll should be taken to the Order of the Zenith Scale. They have the knowledge and experience to deal with such items. I disagree, Bera replied. If this scroll is our one chance at saving our world, then the Zenith Scale is too high-profile a place to venture with it. The agents of the Chaos Legion will easily see us. It should be a secret mission then, the Burgomaster stated. An Odyssey. Through the wilderness of Praetoria, off the roads, into this temple. We must travel in a small group, River said, as to not attract too much attention. Joken brightened, hope in his gaze. You will accompany me to this temple then? Bera stared hard at the ground for a moment, realizing the momentous task before her. She looked back to the Ifrit. I will do what I must to save the Splinterlands. I will go with you. River stepped up beside the dwarf. We will see this through to the end. Fia looked hard at the Ifrit. This wizard, Agrodius, mentioned me? When Joken nodded, she continued. I am no one special. But I want the Chaos Legion gone as much as everyone else. I join. Delia hopped to her feet. Of course I'm going. You all will need somebody to watch your backs while you do this ritual. She tapped her bow. Burgomaster William stood up. I will ensure you have any necessary supplies before you set out. But first, he pulled a rolled-up parchment from his desk and spread it out. I have a map of Praetoria here. Joken, please, show us the location of this temple. The group gathered around the map as Joken tapped the location of Kainek, centrally located in Praetoria. His finger then traced upwards, out of the central fire territory and into the wild northeast. His finger went further to a dark line on the map. Here, he stated. It lies within the Abyssal Canyon. That is far, the Burgomaster observed. It will take you more than a month if you are not delayed. Then that is what we will do, Bera said matter-of-factly. There was no hope or courage in her voice, only acceptance of the situation. Let's get ready and leave tomorrow morning. The wilds of Praetoria were harsh and unforgiving. Staying off any paths or roads to avoid the Chaos Legion's eyes, the group navigated by map alone. Bera was pleased to find that Fia, Delia, and Joken were all very skilled in reading the terrain and finding routes. Joken had sent his bird away for a time to attract less attention, assuring them the bird would return when needed. They crossed the foothills of the Mountains of Fire, the great range that dominated central Pretoria. They had to hide often in the rocky terrain to avoid scouting Chaos Legion patrols that remained in the proximity of the volcano, the Mountain of Ash. Leaving the foothills behind, they soon came to the River of Angels, the great divide between the Central Fire Territory and the wild northeast. Crossing was difficult, but they managed with only a few scrapes and bruises. After a few days across the plains, they reached the dense green of the Emerald Jungle. While the interior provided a reprieve from the sun and wind, it was overgrown and difficult to keep their bearings. Becerril could see this journey weighing on all of her companions. Travel was rough, and even when they slept, it was with constant fear that they would be discovered. The fate of the Splinterlands rested with them, and as each new day passed, that burden grew heavier and heavier. One night, as they camped within the Emerald Jungle, Becerril pulled out the map. Lit by the light of their campfire, she observed what lay ahead. "Once we get free of the jungle," Becerril said, "the Gravestone swamplands await us. Then it's a journey through the dry-bone badlands until we reach the canyon." She sighed. "It's still a long way." "If we traveled closer to the road," Delia began, "then we could make better time." "It's too risky," Becerril dissented. "But it's worth the payoff. Bigger risk, bigger reward." Becerril shook her head. "No, I will not lead us closer to the road and risk jeopardizing our entire quest." Delia huffed, leaning back against her bedroll. Becerril was tired of the young Delia challenging her at every turn, always pushing for faster ways that put them in more danger. "We can fight off any attackers," Delia said in a quieter tone. "And even if we are hurt, River can heal us." River's eyebrows pinched together, and anxiety was heavy in his tone as he spoke. "I do not like the burden falling on me to save us. Healing magic is not easy, and it takes a great deal out of me." "Let's just trust Becerril," Fia advised. "She always leads us in the right direction." Becerril sighed and pushed her hair back from her face. Her gaze flicked over to Joken, who watched the fire quietly. He was usually silent, not offering suggestions in these arguments that seemed to break out with more frequency the longer they traveled. They went to bed on edge that night, and woke up even more irritable the next morning. Tempers were high as they traveled through the harsh jungle for 3 more days, avoiding dangerous plants and animals and remaining on alert for enemies. At last, the jungle broke, and they were faced with a vast grey swampland. An unnatural fog clung to the area, obscuring the sky and dropping the temperature. Trees sagged as if weeping, their branches touching the murky water's surface. Muddy, boggy ground was interspersed between stretches of water. The air was filled with the buzz of insects and the smell of rot. Becerril could just barely make out the tops of ancient stone tombstones that stuck out from the ground and water, earning this swamp its name. "It's horrible," Fia said, crinkling her nose. "How did it get like this?" "Texts in the Zenith Scale library say," Delia began, "that these gravestones are from centuries, if not thousands of years ago. The writing is all worn off with time. No one knows who is buried here or what happened to the civilization. This is all that is left." "This place is unsafe," Joken observed. "I can feel a shift here. Death mana is strong, and traces of necromancy linger. We must be very cautious." "If it's too dangerous, we should go around," Becerril suggested. "It will not do for us to perish here from the elements are undead." "That will take forever," Delia complained, arms crossed. "We don't have time to go around." Becerril ignored the headache that pulsed every time Delia challenged her, The dwarf relented. Fine. Follow my lead then, and do exactly as I say. Bera trekked forward, Fia mirroring her movements exactly. The others followed. It was a long day of navigating through the muck, and when it came time to make camp, it was even more difficult to find a dry area. After an hour of searching with exhausted bodies and short tempers, they found a rocky area out of the water's reach. It was uncomfortable, but at least it wasn't wet. Deciding not to light a fire, they sat quietly, eating their dinner. Suddenly, Delia's head snapped up. She stared off into the darkness, frowning. "What is it?" River asked. "There's something out there," the archer whispered. "I heard it move." "I can go look," Fia suggested, looking to Bera for approval. "I am really stealthy." "No, it's too dangerous," the dwarf replied. "I will look." Bera climbed off the rocks and back down into the mud. Her eyes combed the night, struggling to see what had put Delia on alert. She drifted out several feet, not wanting to put too much distance between herself and the camp. Just when she was about to give up, she made out movement. It was only just visible, like part of the darkness itself had shifted. But there was presence. It was heavy and made a pit of dread settle in Bera's stomach. The dwarf pulled out her sword, backing up towards the camp. Whatever it was did not follow. She waited for 1 minute, 2, and then several, until she could not feel it anymore. It was gone. Returning to the camp, Bera knelt and said quietly, "There was definitely something, but I think it left." "A person?" Joken asked. "I don't think so. We should keep careful watch in case it returns." Sleeping was not easy that night, as they took turns keeping watch. During each of their watches, they woke up the others when the creature returned. Any attempt at finding it, however, was futile. The next morning, they were all tired from the restless night, but pushed onward all the same. 2 more days passed exactly the same way. The days were quiet, still and foreboding, but the nights brought the stalker. They barely slept, and their pace of travel slowed. It was late evening the 3rd day when another argument broke out. "We must leave this swamp," Bera commanded. "There are still more days of traveling to cross it, and we will be easy prey if we keep pushing on while exhausted." All of her companions stared back at her with drawn faces, dark circles under their eyes, and a tired hunch to their backs. "We cannot leave," Delia complained, still managing to sound fiery despite her exhaustion. "We've come so far already. We have to find this stalker and fight it. No more hiding, sneaking and watching. We take the fight to it." "That's easier said than done," Bera snapped. "I am really sorry, Bera," Fia began, "but I have to side with Delia on this. I'm tired of being hunted. Let's hunt it. We are all strong. We stopped Obsidian after all." River ran his fingers through his disheveled hair. "We are strong, yes. But we have fought people and fungus creatures and elementals, not something made of darkness and undeath." Fia took a step forward. "While we fight, if you stay back and heal us..." "Enough!" River growled, his temper at last broken. "I will not accept the burden of being everyone's savior when they take unnecessary risks." A stunned silence held over the group. Bera had never seen her friend lose his temper before, or shout at anyone. A hurt look crossed Fia's face, but Delia only seemed to be more fired up. Joken watched, as usual, silently. Bera spoke up, her tone unyielding. "This conversation is over, until we can all communicate with clearer heads. Make camp. We can decide our course of action when everyone is calmer." Camp was quickly erected on another patch of rocks, no one saying a word. With grey evening light still giving the swamp some visibility, Bera walked a few yards away from the camp and sat on a tangle of roots. She needed space to think. Despite her quick control of the argument, her heart was pounding and her nerves on edge. Bera sighed and rested her chin on one palm. What am I gonna do with them all? They look up to you. Jurken's voice sounded behind her. The dwarf glanced over her shoulder at him. I don't think I'm someone they should look up to. Jurken drifted around and sat across from her, his hands buried in his sleeves. What makes you say that? You are Dallin, after all. A tired laugh escaped her. You know the family name. I did my research to know who Agrodius was sending me after. Your ancestry is impressive. Leaders, advisors, military captains and heroes. You must be very proud to come from such a family. Bera stared at the ripples on the murky water as she answered. I suppose so. A story is passed down in my family. Generations ago, a Dallin sacrificed himself to save a town from a horrible monster. A goddess saw his selflessness, and in his honor, blessed his bloodline. Every Dallin has something special about him, and is destined to do great things, because the blood of that hero flows through us all. That is an inspiring story. When she didn't answer or look up, he added, You do not seem to be inspired, however. I was when I was younger. It's what drove me to journey through Praetoria and lead New Everett. But now what? Bera looked up at him, making a sweeping gesture. It's all different now. I've been invaded by the Chaos Legion. The Splinter Lands is on its knees. I know everyone expects greatness from me, whether they know the Dallin history or not, but she gave a long exhale. I'm worried about living up to it. Times are worse now than they have ever been. I'm worried that I will be the only Dallin failure. The end of a great line. I'm worried that I will mess it all up now, when it matters most. You have already spoken the solution to this worry you feel, he stated with a small smile. Bera cocked one eyebrow. Yes, the Dallin line is one of heroes, but not everyone knows this. The young Fia and Delia do not. I have a feeling River Helendale followed you even before he knew of your family. Well, yes. The Burgomaster of Kainek easily trusted you with this quest, because he saw your leadership and courage during the battle to defend his town. All of these people follow your lead, because you have demonstrated being worthy of it, not because of a name. Bera couldn't help the smile that tugged at the corners of her mouth at that. I want to be good enough for those three. She nodded her head towards the camp. Fia admires me almost like a mother, and because of that I get overprotective. River is such a good friend to me, with such a soft heart. And I'm always trying to be a shield against the world. I'm not even sure how to handle Delia. She's always fighting with me. Focus on their strengths, Belladelan. Agrodius thought they were worthy of this task. For a reason. His eyes twinkled with amusement. I believe you know this reason. If you can see past your own stress and burdens. Bera blinked and a sincere smile spread across her face. You're right. She stood. I believe I know just what to do. Bera marched back to the camp, Jurken trailing after her. She bounded up the rocks, put her hands on her hips, and looked across at her three companions. They looked up at her, confused at this change in attitude. I know this has all been hard, Bera stated. I know we are tired and hurt. I know we all feel the weight of this mission. I also know we have argued and gotten on one another's nerves. But I believe it is only our strengths showing, River. She looked at the elf. You are my oldest friend, and the kindest soul I have ever met. You ask so much of yourself, but that is because you are capable of rising to every challenge. Fia. She looked to the pirate girl. I am happy to teach and mentor you as much as you'd like. That is because I do see greatness in you. A person who is stealthy and observant and courageous. And Dahlia. Her gaze at last fell to the archer. I am sorry, I only saw you questioning my judgment as rebelliousness. It may be true that you are defiant, but that is also your strength. You question things, and you are passionate and fearless. I believe you will make a great leader someday. All three beamed up at her, and the tension in the air lifted. Let us now put our heads together, Bear stated, and I am positive we can find a way to stop this stalker and carry on with our journey. The darkness of night was all-encompassing. Though she could not see, Bear relied on her ears as she and the others pretended to sleep at their camp. Only Dahlia sat up, pretending to be on watch. Bear knew she could count on Dahlia's fearlessness to pull off this part of their plan. They all remained still for a long stretch of time, before Bear heard Dahlia stand. The archer tapped her foot against the rock as a signal, and then started off into the swamp. Bear counted the seconds down in her head. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She did not hear the stealthy Fia, but the young woman tapped on her shoulder as she passed and ventured into the swamp as well. Bear let go of her worry and trusted her companions as she waited. 1 minute passed, then 2. And then Dahlia's cry of pain sounded the start of the attack. It was immediately followed by the twang of a rope trap triggered. The first part of the plan had worked. Bear rolled to her feet, drawing sword and shield in one movement. River jumped up beside her and they both ran towards their friends. Bear could just barely see Dahlia, hunched over and holding a wound in her side. A massive creature thrashed just before her. Entangled in the rope trap Fia had set off. Water splashed around, spraying them all, as a hissing sound came from their trapped foe. No! Bear shouted. Jok'en appeared from his hiding place and surged forward, wrapping one blazing hand around the rope that Fia had coated in lantern oil. It caught fire, lighting the entire area in red and orange. Its glow lit up the defiant Dahlia, who had played the part of bait, luring the stalker to attack. The young woman was currently staggering back, trying to untangle her tunic from the stalker's grasp. The fire lit up Fia, who stood behind the creature with sword in hand. It also lit up what stalked them for days. It was an undead skeleton of massive proportions, its head as big as Bear's torso. It came out of the water, only half of it visible, as if it was part of the swamp itself. A rib cage was hung with moss and mud. 2 large horns crowned a minotaur-like skull. Its arms were long and ended in sharp claws. An ominous fog rolled off of it, as if coming from the bones themselves. Currently, a rope trap was wrapped around its spine, tethering it to a tree. The flames blazed inside the stalker's ribcage, making it even more nightmarish. It was no normal fire, for Jok'en's Efreet bloodline made the flames extraordinarily hot and strong. As Dahlia and Fia went on the attack, the creature writhed and the rope creaked with effort. Hold it! Bear commanded. River slid up beside her, the words of a spell tumbling from his lips. With one hand, he took control of the water around the base of the creature, a tendril of liquid wrapping around the spine to hold the stalker in place. With the other hand, he focused his energies on the bleeding Dahlia. Sweating with the effort, River simultaneously healed her wound and held the creature at the same time. Bearer rushed forward as her companions fought the undead stalker, cracking its bones. It screeched out in anger, throwing its head back. Bearer used that to her advantage. She sprung from gravestone to boulder to tree, and then leaped high into the air. Flying in the air shield first, she bashed through the skull and used her sword to cut the jaw cleanly off. The impact was jarring, but she held firm as she crushed the head of the stalker and landed back in the swamp. The creature dropped heavily, the rest of its headless body burning to ash from the Ifrit flames. For a moment, everyone stood watching, waiting for it to move again. But it did not. "Very well done," Joken praised, standing calmly. Delia and Fia both cheered, embracing one another. Bera smiled up at River. "You were incredible. Good work." "I believe," the elf said, "that this is a sign that our group can overcome any challenge. We can save the Splinterlands because we must." Bera nodded, and then looked at Joken over her shoulder. He smiled broadly at her and inclined his head. "Yes," Bera thought, "we can all do this. Together."
An elf, a dwarf, and a pirate girl set out to save the world. Joined by a zenith archer, they saved Koenig from the worst. An Ifrit came with a message so grave, but hope lay in his words. Now the group embarks on an odyssey to bring the Rift Watchers to the world. Yeah, the group embarks on an odyssey to bring the Rift Watchers to the world.